Let's now talk about common writing data situations. And again, remember that I'm using the word data in a very informal sense. So let's start with perhaps, again, the most common situation in which, again, in R, say you have a data frame. So let me draw a picture for it. Pretend this is supposed to be some data frame object. Of course, R will never display those grid lines, but this is just to illustrate what's going on. So if you have a data frame in R and you're interested in exporting this guy to an external file, if you are interested in saving this guy, then we have the equivalent function or the reverse function to read.table. In this case, it's going to be write.table. Again, same to the read.csv. You also have the write.csv version. This is just, again, a wrapper of write.table. And typically what you need to specify here as the input of these guys is, well, what is the name of the output file? Again, not just the name, but potentially if you're exporting these guys to a different directory, different from your working directory, you want to specify that with the name of the output file. And then, of course, the name of the data frame, let me abbreviate it like this, df, that it's going to be exported. And you also have several other arguments to control if you want to include row names, column names, the decimal separator, similar arguments to the reading table versions of these guys. Another situation, again, typically, let's say you have some sort of vector. Typically, it's going to be a character vector, but it could be any type of vector. So again, let's say you are in R. And again, I'm just going to draw a picture, just a pictorial representation of some sort of vector. And you want to export its contents to an external file. What you could use is the writeLines function. This is equivalent to the readLines, but in this case, it's the writeLines. And again, you need to specify both the output file together with its location, and then the name of the vector that contains the data that you want to export. A third situation is when you have all sorts of objects. They could be data frames, they could be vectors, they could be lists, they could be matrices, arrays, other types of objects, not necessarily these guys. But let's say you are working in a session, you are calculating different outputs in different types of objects. Some of these guys, you could have other stuff. And let's say you want to save them in an r.rdata file. Remember the .rdata file, this is supposed to be a binary format. This is native to R, so it's R's binary format. Well, if that's the case, you can always use the save function. The save function, typically you need to specify what is the name of the output file, and then you could list the names of the objects. So say you have, let's say you have a vector X, let's say you have a data frame called TBL, let's say you have a list called LIS, and you want to save these three guys in an .rdata file. Well, this is what you can use to save them. As for the file name, just let me give you an example. You could, for instance, specify something like this, some objects .r data, that could be the name of my output file, and this will be saved in the working directory associated to your R session. This actually could be really helpful, for example, when you are doing large computations or you are working on projects that running the commands, doing the analysis, it's going to take you some time, you're going to produce a lot of objects. This could be time-consuming computations or calculations, and you don't want to close the session, come again, open your RMD file or open your script files and have to rerun everything again. So the next time you need them, the next time you want to use those objects, all you have to do is, instead of using the save function, you're going to use the load function, and again specify the name and the location of the file containing these objects. When you have our output, so as an example, let's say I decide to calculate a regression line, performing a regression analysis. This is a toy example. Let's say I decide to use the LM function. This is the linear model function. And I want to consider miles per gallon, regress this onto variables HP for horsepower, CYL for cylinders, WT for weight, and all of those variables, all of these guys are in the empty cars data frame. So I'm going to specify for the argument data, the name of the object, the name of the data frame containing all those guys. So this will give me an output. I'm going to store this guy in an object reg for regression. And I could, for example, I could use the function summary, pass my regression object to summary, and R will display some numeric information, some summary output. So I'm going to draw that with this cloud. This is supposed to contain the actual displayed output from the function summary. So what if I want to save this type of output? The way it is displayed, exactly the way it is displayed in R, if this is what I want to accomplish, there is a very interesting function, which is the sync function. What the sync function does, it actually allows you to divert output. Instead of displaying things on the console or on your RMD file or on your RMD viewer, the output will be diverted. So it diverts output to external files. Typically, the way you would use it is you start by calling sync. Here, you need to specify the output file, the name of the file, as well as the direction. And then you write the commands. So I could write, assuming that I already calculated reg. So let's say over here, I already calculated my linear model object. What I could do after the sync function, just call summary, pass the regression object, and then say that's all I want to divert. I would need to call again sync, parentheses, nothing inside parentheses, right? So there is nothing specified, just to close the diverting mechanism. Another option that has to do with saving, exporting output to external media is that has to do with plots, with graphics, with diagrams, etc. There are different functions you have, depending on what type of output format you want to produce. You have functions such as PNG, allows you to create a PNG image. You have JPEG, the JPEG function. You have BMP for bitmaps. You have TIF or double F. If you want to create PDFs, you have PDFs. If you're interested in creating SVG images, so you also have the corresponding function. All of these guys, again, you need to provide an output file. The important thing when providing the output file, so for example, if I'm deciding to create a plot a graphic in PNG format. So let's say I'm going to produce a scatter plot, and I'm going to call my file a scatter plot. The extension PNG has to match the name of the function. So just be careful with every time you're using these guys. So PNG parentheses specify the name. You could specify more arguments controlling the visual output of the produced image. Then include the code. So say I'm going to use plot, and let's say I'm going to take the empty cars data frame. I'm going to plot a scatter plot using miles per gallon MPG for the x-axis and using HP horsepower for the y-axis. You could also specify more things controlling plot. Let me just keep it simple. And then the important thing is you need to use the function dev.off. So it's the device off function, which closes the diverting mechanism for plotting purposes. Say you have a customized output or customized text that you want to output. This can be done typically with the cat function, the concatenate function. So here's one possibility. Again, this is just a toy example. So what I can do is use the function cat to specify what's going to be the output file. So let me call it simply output.txt. And let's say I want to concatenate 4 pieces of text or 4 numeric information. It doesn't have to be text, but I could do, for example, first line, and then let's say second line. That's going to be one more output thing. Let's do line number 3, for instance, and let's include one more line. So one extra line. So let's say we want to take these 4 pieces of text, and I need to specify what's going to be the character separator, SEP. This is the character separator, so I'm going to include a new line so that the text is actually broken down into lines. I close the parentheses, and what R will do is it's going to take all of these guys, export them to the output file, output.txt, using the new line character as my separator for all these guys.